Zach, and welcome to what I hope is an interesting first video on my channel. Well, if you ignore the many unlisted videos that I took down because I hated them. Moving along from that though, in this video I want to give my own 2 cents on antagonistic and villain-coded characters. Now, I know many people have probably done this before, so I will be talking about D&D characters in the campaigns I have played in, NPCs in the backstories of my player characters, as well as NPCs from my board campaign. A quick little disclaimer before I fully jump in. I am by no means a literary expert, nor am I the best at breaking down aspects of a character, but I want to give it my best shot. I love to break down characters, figure out what makes them tick, and see if I can figure out why they behave the way they do. I also love to write and tell stories, so I will be reading sections from character backstories when applicable to the topic at hand. Now, onto the video. Antagonists aren't necessarily villains. While they can go hand in hand, they aren't fully synonymous. The definition of an antagonist is a person who actively opposes or is hostile to someone or something, aka an adversary. While the definition of villain is a character whose evil actions or motives are important to the plot, or the person or thing responsible for specified trouble, harm, or damage. Now, the character I'm currently drawing on screen here is a Grindylow by the name of Samantha. She falls into the antagonist area because while she has done bad things, it was what she thought was for the greater good. None of her actions were out of malice inherently, but she did prove herself to be an adversary for the party in the first 2 acts of Mariner's Tales. I won't get into specifics of what she did in the Mariner's Tales campaign because I plan to make videos about that campaign, but I will talk about how I feel about her actions out of character. I respect her dedication to her cause because I would do the same if I was in her shoes, or tentacles. However, the fact that she would rather manipulate, hurt people who cared about her and trusted her, as well as leave the party on for as long as she did, made her an antagonist. I do like her as a character because she's a very fine example of an antagonist, but I do not like her otherwise, and if she was real, I would tell her to square up in the 76 parking lot and I would beat her ass.
Now, moving on to other NPCs, I will be talking about Calalay's dad, Eldar Nyland. For slight context, Calalay was my character in the first 2 acts of Mariner's Tales, and a lot of his plot revolved around his father. Eldar isn't a bad person, but he did a significant amount of trauma to Calalay that he is still canonically healing from. Eldar never wanted to hurt Calalay because he loved him, but because of his choices, he did hurt him. Eldar was put into a complicated situation that put tension on his relationship with Calalay. I will now read a little relevant excerpt from his backstory. He got as close as he could manage without causing a plank in the floor of the old ship to give away his position. What he heard next made him weak in the knees and caused the color to drain from his face. Captain Nyland, with all due respect, we cannot lose any more crews to these monsters. We don't care if you have a monster for us. There's disgust in the man's voice as he speaks, a venom lacing his words. Son. But you have a duty to uphold to the Pirate Queen, and if you don't do something about this, we have no choice but to take down the Sirens ourselves. And that includes your so-called son. So what say you? There's a thick silence in the air, and Calalay was practically drowning in it, clutching tightly to the glass globe like it was the only thing keeping him afloat. For the first time in his life, he felt absolute, unfettered fear gripping at his heart. What would his father say? Would he go against these orders, or would he comply? He feared either option and what the future would hold for him. And here's another. Sure, it wasn't honest work, but what's that matter to a pirate? The captain motions for the crew to ascend back to the Twilight Whisper, taking extra care to make sure Calloway wasn't looking at any of the bodies. He didn't want to have to lie to his son more than he already was. Eldar wanted Calloway to be unaware and free, and he feared what might happen if he knew the truth about what he had done. Once again, Eldar never had the intention of hurting Calloway, but because of his actions, he did. In terms of backstory aside from the other pirate captains, Eldar had unintentionally become an antagonist to Calloway. Moving on to another NPC, we have Levy Himmel from my campaign, Bard's Descent. Levy was in a similar boat to Eldar, but instead he did it for the sake of his sister, Piper. Piper is one of the player characters in the campaign, and where we are in the campaign, she had just found out that Levy is her brother. He had modified memory cast on her when she was younger to forget that. The reason he had done that to her is because he thought it would keep her safe from the trouble he had got himself into, but in the end, she got into it anyways. So in my opinion, antagonists aren't bad, just misguided, and can be redeemed. However, villains aren't worthy of such grace.
Okay, so going into this segment, I would like to give a trigger warning for obsessive behavior, murder, and just general violence. I would also like to say that I do not stand for the behaviors of the character I will be talking about here, despite me being her player. So, villains, right? You love to hate them and you hate to love them. I know I sure do, because I play in a campaign called Friend or Fate. Friend or Fate is a campaign where we all played, I say all played like past tense because we only have the epilogue left to do of this campaign, and I'm sad about it. But we played characters who are considered evil. My character's name is Tomar Expiry, and she has done a lot of horrendous shit. Her whole arc is based around her obsession with killing a man by the name of Baxter Thundervale and taking his eyes because he blinded her. I also wanted to play with the concept of a person of religion blindly falling from grace because it is a concept I personally find fascinating, despite me not really having had religious ties since I was a kid. The bare bones of her story are she was a devout priestess of Mishakal who was led astray by the Queen of Air and Darkness because of her sheer rage and resentment. She met the other two party members, Lavalta and Adam, on her travels, and the three of them found out in one way or another that Baxter had affected them. Throughout the campaign, Tomer began her descent into just madness. Instead of reading off backstory stuff for her, I want to read off my late night rambles of me breaking down her behaviors based on her alignment changes throughout the campaign. This breakdown was written after the session where she had killed her mom and a couple sessions before finding her father. Lawful evil. She followed laws if she felt they suited her. Those laws being the commands of her patron, which she at the time thought to be her god. She literally got out of cult jail because she talked about how she was on a divine mission, and because the cult didn't want to fuck with that, they let her go. She was very proper, careful with her words and actions, and avoided getting into things that weren't her business, or weren't related to finding Baxter. Neutral evil. Much like Lawful, she followed the commands of her patron because it was at this point she found out that she was a warlock. Actual law became something that she felt only stood in her way. She killed paladins of her church because she felt they only stood in her way, and whatever stood in her way must go down. It was because of this she started becoming indifferent if people died or not, so as long as they didn't get in her way. Chaotic evil. This is still new territory, but I'll say my plans for how she acts now. She will put herself into situations, mostly battles, for two reasons now. Just to rid herself of the intense emotions via violence, namely her anger or fear, or just impulse. She followed her mother when she forced her to go speak to Loth, not because she wanted to, but because she felt if she could attack her mother to distract Loth and get her sister, it would work out. She struggles to think farther ahead because her world has been flipped on its head ever since Vecna took Baxter. She tries, but there's only two things in her mind: how Baxter's eyes will be hers, and that she needs to find her father and give mantra to him. Lavalta posed the question that, what if you don't find your dad? What if you are taking care of mantra for the long term? Do you think it would be fair for her to lose another semi-parental figure because of how you acted today? All she really said was no. There wasn't really any feeling behind it. She just stood there, holding her baby sister close, practically numb to the world since she nearly died that day. It's not that death bothered her per se. It's more that a lot was going through her head. Baxter was still alive, how he has a literal monster with him, and how good it was going to be to kill him again. If I had to divide where her thoughts were, it's 70% Baxter and 30% her sister and finding her dad. Which isn't great, but she's not a good person, so don't expect a lot from her. Every action I took in character with Tomer was deliberate and had reason behind it. I love playing typical hero characters in D&D, but I wanted to see what it would be like to do the inverse. Tomer's actions aside, I want to briefly talk about the BBEG of my campaign. If you are a player from my campaign watching this, here's a handy timestamp to skip to so you don't get spoilers. I'll know if you stayed or not. Come session, I will kill thee. I will kill thee. /J, I love you, but please skip to the timestamp. Okay. The Witch of Wanderlust, known also as the Spirit of Wanderlust, is a blight on the seasonal plane of Kimu. It is the culmination of the spirits of long-dead travelers who died trying to get back home. It is the reason why the spirit gardens were put in place by the seasonal gods as a way to protect these wandering souls from wanderlust. When this happened, the spirit became enraged and attacked the ancient city of Elder Hollow. To try and prevent any further attacks, they trapped the spirit within the roots of an ancient tree and left it under the protection of 3 dryads, Wilyeda, Kanzu, and their child Ambrosia. During its time trapped in the roots of the tree, the spirit had come to realize the only way that it would get any of its will done is to find a proper host. And so began its song. A song so enthralling that it caused people to be led right into its trap, and it found a proper host in an Avian girl by the name of Zephyr, which set it free from the tree. In the following centuries, the plane started to fall into ruin. A great war broke out. People fell victim to the song, and the goddess Thermusa, who represented the spring, died as her 3 oldest children, Acadia, Halcyon, and Alias tried in vain to freeze the kingdom in time to save her. The campaign is set 8 years after the fallen goddess's fourth child, Marmalade, is returned home and crowned queen, and yet the spirit's work isn't done till it sees all the seasons fade to grey. And that's all I have today. I hope you enjoyed my little D&D rambles. I love to talk about this stuff, if you can't already tell. So if you want to hear more, don't hesitate to subscribe and tell me what else you would like to see. I already mentioned I want to make videos for the first 2 acts of Mariner's Tales, and I am also considering doing videos of me reading my characters' backstories with either speed paints of pieces I want to make for them or actually draw out the scenes. Whatever I have the energy and time for, that is. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye! And I promise I'll get a better mic. But right now I'm working with shit.